Um, so today's like Wednesday or something. Today's actually Monday, June 16th, right? Um, I'm I'm finishing the AI apps that I've been working on, the AI chat apps I've been working on, right? I made a couple of improvements to it, so I'm finishing it. I'm just working on like the mini apps in the AI app, on the AI chat app that I'm working on. So I've been thinking about my what the next project is going to be. There are a couple of candidates I have in my head. There's like a full audio browser called Ogo that the Holy Spirit gave me like I think it's like some 4 or 5 months now. So that one is there. There's like a normal regular web browser that I imagined that the Holy Spirit gave me. That one's FD. And then there's this radio. There are a lot of projects, right? But then there's this radio, like how like this traditional radio station, right? You know how podcast kind of like made radio obsolete, right? Okay, cool. So if I remember correctly, when OSP gave me the idea, right, it was how we could use like AI to like bring radio back, right? But not like in the traditional. But if it's going to come back, it's going to come back with like some AI oomph, if you will, right? So you'd be able to personalize the content. You'd be able to interrupt them. You'd be able to um, you'd be able to interact with the host live, and then you could dictate what you want to listen to. Essentially, it's just like a radio that like you could do whatever you want it to do, right? Okay, cool. So to make that possible, right? So just straight to the technical stuff. So for this to work, right, you have to first understand what a radio is, right? You know that if purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable, right? So if we have to know what a radio is, so it's really happy. Okay, cool. So essentially, a radio is just a playlist. A radio is a playlist that never ends. It's just a playlist that is just constantly on. It's just constantly being updated, right? Which is what a radio station is, right? So essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to create like an M3 file. We're going to create a playlist, and then we're going to have AI generate audio, which is something we're going to generate text, and then we're going to convert that text into audio, which is TTS, right? And then we're going to add the generated audio to the playlist. Well, so we're going to constantly be feeding the playlist with like generated audio, and then boom, would have like a radio station essentially. And there's going to be a lot of like different, like I said, you'll be able to personalize the content, and you're going to be able to, the user is going to be able to personalize the content. There's going to be AI generated music. There are going to be shows like sitcoms like Friends. There are going to be podcasts. They're going to be, and when I say podcast, I don't mean like AI generated podcast. I mean like normal podcasts from like Apple Podcast, and then the AI are going to like comment on it and talk about it and interrupt it. Everything is going to be lively. We're going to chop it up. I'm going to try to like really like make it look as like natural as possible. There's going to be things like programs like Saturday Night Live, where you have like you have like AI, you have like a host, and then you have like the audience. The audience will respond in real time. They'll clap. If the AI says something funny, they'll laugh. If they say something nice, they'll clap. Again, all this is just like, we have like all these FX engines now, right? All these AI generated FX engines. We have all this AI generated music. So music is also going to play, right? And not just lo-fi music, AI generated music, like proper music. We're going to use all this AI generated music generation, right? There's going to be weather, there's going to be personalized news, there's going to be gossip. You could just drag, like, let's say there's like an article on TMZ. You could just drag the article inside the radio station, and then they'll just start discussing the article for you. Stuff like that. So I ran this back with ChatGPT for like technical stuff, right? And then it came up with a couple of like hurdles, right? Although number one it talked about was storage, which I didn't think about. If you're just, again, like I said, it's an M3 file. So if you're just appending files, at some point you're going to run out of storage, right? It might take time, but in the end you run out of, I think they say in Nigeria. Okay, in the end you run out of storage. So the way we mitigate against that is on AWS, right? Amazon has this thing called AWS. AWS has this thing called S3, which is where you store files, and then they have this feature where like the files get deleted. The system can handle like file deletions for you after a certain period of time. So usually the way I set it is 24 hours, right? After the file has aged for 24 hours, then it gets automatically deleted, right? Right. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here. So we're going to set it to like 3 hours, right? So as we are penning files to the M3U8 file, to the M3U8 audio files to the M3U8 playlist, right? After 3 hours, right, the file is automatically going to be deleted from the system, right? So that solves the storage problem. And by the way, this is a lot more trivial to put on the web than to do on iOS, because on the web it's just an M3. You are just streaming from an M3U8 file. On iOS, you probably need like some sort of like server to like handle it in the background, but we'll get there. So that's like problem number 2. And then problem number 3 that is raised, was latency, right? How do you make sure that the radio, there's no buffering, there's no, it's like real-time radio. What we take normal radio for, at least I take normal radio for granted, because in my heart, I don't, there's no buffering, there's no stuttering. It's just like, it just plays and it just works, right? And, so how do we replicate that with AI without like, how do we handle the buffering and the latency thing, right? Very cool. So, number 1, I doubt if we'll run into that problem, because, TTS is like, we're going to use a lot of like, TTS from text-to-speech from, OpenAI, right? And then the latency for their GPT-4 text-to-speech engine is very, very low. So I seriously doubt we run into any buffering or latency issues. But if we do, right, let's say we were trying to generate like AI music, right, for instance, or we were trying to like download like a podcast on Apple Podcasts so that the AI can comment on it, or maybe there's just like a latency. Let's just imagine there's actually a latency, right? In video, we'll have a fallback, right? We have fallbacks, actually, multiple fallbacks, right? When your backup plan has a backup plan and your backup plan has a backup plan, stuff like that, right? So number 1 backup plan we'll do is, we'll just, like I said, for this thing to be successful, right, we'll have to like borrow leaves from like different like media, right? So I remember when God of War was like, the last God of War was going to be released, right? There was this whole thing about how a lot of gamers are complaining about how about loading screens, essentially, right? They were talking about loading screens. So in video games, right, there's this clever thing they do with loading screens where when they want to load in the next stage, right, they are unloading the former stage and then they are trying to load in the next stage. What they do is they create this like creative loading screen where you're actually controlling the character is moving forward, or in case of God of War, right, Kratos is like slithering through like between 2 rocks, right? It's just like moving in between 2 rocks, right? Meanwhile, the former stage that you are in is unloading, and they are loading the next stage in. Very creative way of doing stuff, right? So what if we took that concept and we applied it to audio, right? We created this this audio that if there's some sort of buffering, right, we'll have like we'll have filler content, essentially, right? Where essentially let me just leave it at that, right? So that's number 1 technique. And then number 2 technique is we'll have like, maybe we can have like a lo-fi playing or something, if just in case that doesn't work. If that fallback also, our creative loading screen doesn't work, audio loading screen doesn't work, audio loading doesn't work, then we'll have like what's it called now? We'll have like maybe like one backup lo-fi song down. If that doesn't work though, then if that also doesn't work, then we'll kick in real time. Then OpenAI's real time audio, real time advanced voice mode, real time API will kick in, right? So once there's like, so that'll be like real time voice. It's just kick in, just in case. So we'll have like all these multiple backups just to handle latency. Again, I ran this thing through with ChatGPT to just try to see like the some of the hurdles we might hit, but he came up with a couple, but they are not strong enough to like deter me from working on the project. So I don't know. I think I'll give it a shot. By God's grace, right? I hope the Holy Spirit helps me on this one, right? As it usually does, but okay. Bye-bye. I just wanted to so I won't forget again. But I'm not saying this is the next project we're working on. It's still up in it's still up for debate. So I'll ask God and anything he says, I'll work on it. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye-bye. And then also here, this story that I was working on yesterday, this I dream of Parmesan. Maybe I'll find time, maybe tomorrow or next tomorrow, and just make the full story, so it doesn't drag on for another 2 weeks again.